Let's make a deal. The government reopens, but negotiations between Democrats and Republicans continue. We're on Capitol Hill. Heading for home. Myanmar makes a deal with Rohingya Muslims less than 2 months after Pope Francis visited the country. Dazzling and dangerous. Tens of thousands flee after a volcano in the Philippines spews lava and ash into the air. It's all downhill. A group of nuns heads outdoors for some winter fun. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. New doubts tonight as lawmakers try to hammer out a bipartisan immigration deal. The top Senate Democrat is taking back his offer of billions of dollars for a border wall. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us now. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The president says no one knows if Republicans and Democrats will reach an immigration deal in time. Senators have until February 8th. That's when funding runs out again and another shutdown would kick in. Tonight, the fight over young immigrants is still simmering. A bipartisan group of senators is working on an immigration deal. But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says the ball is in the majority's court.
Every Democrat, all 49 of us, supports DACA. The pressure now is on Leader McConnell and the Republican moderate caucus to help find us a solution that protects the 800,000 Dreamers and can pass the Senate.
Senator Richard Shelby, a Republican from Alabama, says no one knows if a deal will be struck. For him, border security is the key.
The president is adamant on the wall, beginning of a wall of some areas and so forth. But the main thing is border security. We should secure our borders. We should have always done it, and we should enforce the law, and we haven't.
For weeks, protesters demanded lawmakers include protections in the spending bill for Dreamers, immigrants brought to the country illegally as minors. 20-year-old Dreamer Sergio Gonzalez is one of them, looking for a solution.
We're sending a message of urgency. We need something done now because our dream, not only mine ends in September, but my family members, friends, co-workers are ending every day.
Sergio there describing the 2-year work and school permits that give immigrants the right to live in the country without fear of deportation. Now, liberal groups are blasting Democrats for agreeing to reopen the government without a firmer deal in place on those Dreamers. Lauren?
Democrats are lashing out, especially on social media. Tell us what they're saying.
Well, Democrats, for one, are calling Senator Schumer a sellout liberal. One liberal group said he's the worst negotiator in D.C., even worse than President Trump. But he has a tall order in place. He's got to appease the liberal base of the Democratic Party, but at the same time, he has to worry about 10 Democratic senators up for re-election this year in 2018 that are in states that President Trump won.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi looking forward to the next election. Thank you, Jason. Alfonso Aguilar, president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles and former chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship. Easy for me to say, joins us now. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
There are different proposals. One by Senators Flake, Graham, and Durbin were sharply criticized by the White House. What is the minimum that needs to be in all of these in the proposal in order to satisfy everybody?
Well, everyone, both Republicans and Democrats, want relief for DACA recipients, those who benefited from the program that President Obama created. But Republicans, especially the president, are asking for funding to expand fencing, the famous wall, ending chain migration, and by that the president means doing away with visa categories for extended family, parents, children with spouses, and then finally doing away with the visa lottery.
So it's the visa programs that are holding it up.
Well, it's everything. I mean, I think Democrats have to be willing to consider those three elements, considering providing enough funding for fencing and those visa programs, exactly, doing away with those visa programs, which in the past they've actually supported eliminating them.
Let's go back to something you said. You said chain migration. You were criticized for coming on this program and using that term, that it was derogatory. Why don't you explain what chain migration is and whether or not it was meant to be derogatory?
Well, I was surprised, and it's being used politically now. People are saying that somehow it's racist. It's ridiculous. It's a policy term that has been used by Republicans and Democrats in the past. In the past, you've had Democrats actually support ending chain migration. What it means is that an immigrant, a legal immigrant, can, through the immigration system, there are visa categories that allows a legal immigrant to petition children who are adults who may be married, siblings, brothers and sisters. So once those people are allowed in, they in turn can petition other people, creating a chain of migration. So the idea that President Trump has and other Republicans is to do away with those two categories. That's it.
But what about splitting families?
It's not splitting family. You would still have family reunification. It would allow for individuals to petition their nuclear family, their spouses and their children, the children that are minors.
How can Catholic teaching inform this debate, in your view?
Well, I think both sides have to be compassionate, right, and put politics aside. That's the first thing. I think we can achieve a deal. It's possible. We're not that far away. On one hand, I think Democrats, as I've said, have to be open to negotiating with Republicans. Some, I think, just want to use the issue politically. And then in the case of Republicans, yes, it's important to secure our border and to strengthen and to ensure that our laws are complied with. But at the same time, we need to be compassionate and find a way to help those people who enter here illegally through no fault of their own.
Or undocumented. All right. Thank you so much, Alfonso Aguilar, president of Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles.
Thank you.
The Justice Department confirms Attorney General Jeff Sessions was questioned for hours last week in connection with the Russia investigation. Special counsel Robert Mueller is heading that probe into alleged meddling in the presidential election. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump has repeatedly denied any collusion in the Russia investigation. He also made clear he wasn't happy when the Attorney General recused himself from the probe. Instead of leading the investigation, Jeff Sessions is now swept up in it. Video shows the Attorney General leaving the White House yesterday after a meeting with President Trump. It's not clear if they talked about Russian meddling in the presidential election. Sessions is the highest-ranking administration official questioned in the investigation, which already led to criminal charges against 4 of Trump's aides. Separately, Sessions is accused of pressuring FBI Director Chris Wray to fire or reassign the people who handled the Clinton email investigation. News website Axios says Wray refused, threatening to quit instead. Today, President Trump denied that report.
No, he didn't at all. He did not even a little bit. Nope. And he's going to do a good job.
The White House still calls Wray, quote, the right choice to clean up the misconduct at the highest levels of the FBI. Some Republicans still question the Justice Department's objectivity after 2 officials involved in the Russia investigation were caught criticizing Trump. Many of the messages sent between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are now missing, which provoked this tweet today from the president. He writes, in one of the biggest stories in a long time, the FBI says it is now missing 5 months worth of lovers Strzok-Page text, perhaps 50,000, all in prime time. Wow. After Trump's tweet, the Associated Press said he overstated the number of missing texts. The Justice Department says 50,000 represents the overall number of messages found on FBI servers. It is seeking to recover the missing text. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. As part of the president's pledge to put American companies and jobs first, the administration imposes tariffs on imported solar energy components and large washing machines. The move follows a recommendation by the U.S. International Trade Commission. Federal help for in-home caregivers is on the way. Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who sponsored a bipartisan act, says they are an invaluable resource to our aging society. The law directs the Department of Health and Human Services to convene an advisory council and come up with federal and state-based strategies to assist those caregivers. According to Senator Collins, Americans 85 and older are the fastest growing segment of the population and have a higher need for round-the-clock care. Vice President Mike Pence wraps up his trip to Israel by visiting the Western Wall. Pence slipped a note into the wall and placed his hand on it to pray. He called the visit personal and was not accompanied by Israeli politicians. The vice president said hearing what Jerusalem means to followers of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity was very moving. The State Department confirms Americans are among the 22 killed in a Taliban attack on Kabul's Intercontinental Hotel. The 13-hour siege ended Sunday. It is unclear how many U.S. citizens died. Officials say security forces also defused a nearby vehicle full of explosives. A 7.9 magnitude earthquake off Kodiak Island in the Gulf of Alaska leads to a temporary threat of a tsunami. But the threat of tidal waves extended to the U.S. West Coast and Hawaii and forced Alaska residents to seek shelter at higher ground. The alert was canceled after several hours. No damage was reported. A volcano in the Philippines spews red-hot lava 2,000 feet and ash plumes nearly 2 miles into the air. The dazzling but dangerous eruption causes 56,000 villagers to flee. Officials raised Mount Mayan's alert level to 4 out of 5. Pope Francis has left Chile, but attacks on Catholic churches continue. Vandals firebombed the Church of the Sacred Heart of Jesus Sunday night in Santiago. Father Modesto Perez says the damage was minimal. More than a dozen churches have been vandalized since January 12th. President Trump's son-in-law and advisor, Jared Kushner, is part of a White House delegation headed to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. President Trump will join his son-in-law later this week. He is the first sitting president to attend since Bill Clinton in 2000. First Lady Melania Trump will stay home. White House officials cited scheduling and logistical issues. In a letter to the forum's executive chairman, the Holy Father urges participants to safeguard the dignity of the human person. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us with more. Ed, Pope Francis also thanks the World Economic Forum for wanting to include the Catholic perspective. How does the Holy Father describe that perspective?
Well, he really drew attention, Lauren, in this message to what he considers the most pressing issues regarding the world and the economies of the world. And he says that there's a lot of fragmentation, individualism, and he said it's leading to the poverty and suffering of millions of people, a lot of injustice. He says people are being reduced to cogs in a machine, and he wants to really return to or remind those present of the importance of restoring and upholding human dignity.
The Pope also makes reference to selfish lifestyles and indifference to the world around us. What do you think the Pope is asking world leaders to do about that?
Well, he talks about creating societies of inclusiveness, support, a just society. He actually praises entrepreneurship, and he says that if there's ethics in entrepreneurship in business, then they can bring social justice to those areas. But he's obviously very concerned about this whole, this is what he calls, is often called the throwaway society, and he just feels that people are putting profit before human dignity, and that's always been a refrain of Pope Francis.
He also brought up artificial intelligence and robotics, and I'm sure he's not talking about the Roomba I got for Christmas. Why is he doing this?
Yes, well, this is becoming quite an important issue, artificial intelligence and robotics. He says that they should be used for the service of humanity and to protect our common home. But he's also concerned about them being used for unethical practices, which, of course, technology always has been. And he's reminding people that they should be used for the service of humanity and not in immoral or bad ways.
Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Lauren.
As the church celebrates Christian Unity Week, a Russian Orthodox official is asking members of the church to reach out to Catholics.
In order to create a good climate between the two churches, we have to work on common projects which can bring people on both sides together.
Metropolitan Hilarion says some Orthodox are hostile to Catholics, but others are very open to a better relationship. Pope Francis met the head of the Russian Orthodox Church in an historic meeting in 2016. Coming up, a welcome development. Myanmar reaches a deal about the displaced Rohingya Muslims. And persecution in Iraq, how aid will impact Christians in the Middle East. Officials in Myanmar, also known as Burma, say they are ready to welcome back hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims, but the minority group won't be returning right away. Neighboring Bangladesh says many of the refugees aren't convinced. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Officials here say the goal of Myanmar's plan to repatriate all of the Rohingya refugees should include their safe and voluntary return. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert emphasizing the U.S. doesn't want people pushed back into their homes if they don't feel like it's safe.
The work is on to build new shelters for thousands of Rohingya Muslims who remain in eastern Bangladesh. This camp is close to the border with Myanmar. This Rohingya leader says his people would rather die here than go back. Under an agreement, a gradual repatriation is set to begin today. A high-ranking Myanmar official says they're ready.
We have given the Bangladesh side a list of people that we are ready to receive.
But many Rohingya don't trust Myanmar's government. More than 650,000 of the Muslim minority have escaped rape, torture, and murder. Matthew Wells is with Amnesty International.
This is a military that has committed horrific abuses, and there's been no change in the way the military operates. They still operate with complete impunity.
Many countries, including the U.S., also blame Myanmar's military. But the people of Myanmar see the Rohingya as a threat to national security. The Holy Father showed his support for Rohingya refugees in December when he visited Bangladesh. Pope Francis saying God is present in their community. Afterwards, he greeted some of them one by one.
More than 1 million Rohingya are estimated to be living in Bangladesh. Spokesperson Heather Nauert says the State Department has imposed some sanctions on a military general in Myanmar. At this point, she says she can't imagine the religious minority would feel safe enough to go back. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Shocking numbers tonight out of UNICEF. The United Nations Children's Fund says more than 4 million children have been impacted by extreme violence in Iraq. The group says last year alone, 270 children were killed and many were robbed of their childhood by having to fight on the front lines. More than 1 million children forced to leave their homes. The numbers mean at least 1 in 4 children in Iraq affected by conflict and poverty. Earlier this month, the United States Agency for International Development announced funding for Iraqi Christians will now go directly to groups on the ground who are helping religious minorities. Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, joins me. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
You have been a very vocal critic of the UN on this issue. In this new allocation of funds, the UN is involved, but USAID has oversight. Will this work?
Well, I'm hoping that it'll work, but the USAID has called for the UN to improve its accountability, transparency, and due diligence, which is a really damning statement when you think about it, because that means that they don't have those things right now. So it's going to be a big job for them, and half the money is going directly to the minorities, to the Christians and other minorities, and it's thanks to Vice President Pence. He has been just on top of this issue since October, really making it happen. So half the money that we will give will go directly to the NGOs on the ground. The other half is still going to go through the UN.
Including the NGOs, including the Catholic Church. When I was there, I saw villages just destroyed, in rubble.
Yes.
And I know that Archbishop Warda there says that these conditions that the people are living in right here, there is no way without millions and millions of dollars that those towns will ever come back. And it could mean the end of Christianity in the Middle East, in the cradle of
Christianity.
Right.
Yes, this is a significant population for the Christians of the Middle East, the Christians in Iraq. They have more biblical history there than any other place other than Israel. It's very important. They got their faith from Thomas the Apostle, doubting Thomas directly. So it's an important area. Today, they are fasting as Prophet Jonah told them, exhorted them to do for 3 days. So it's an ancient community. We want to make sure they stay if they can.
Well, some Christians in Iraq some critics of the change say that this could exacerbate fighting among the factions by giving this money to Christians and further endanger communities already at risk. What do you say about that argument?
I think that's nonsense. You have to look at the bigger context. These are people that were targeted for genocide by ISIS. And for the past 3 years, they got virtually nothing of aid from the U.S. because we sent it through the UN, and they marginalized these groups. There is not a single camp in this area run by the UN for Christians. They are expected to go as individuals to camps that are infiltrated by ISIS itself, where they are persecuted. So they don't go. So they have gotten nothing from the UN, and because we've sent, for the past 9 years, our aid through the UN to this region, they've gotten nothing from the US either.
So now it's $110 million that is going. Is that enough?
It's not going to be enough alone. Private aid is still going to be important. One of the big push that I'm involved in right now is to get investment into this area, because these are people that are skilled, that have jobs. The National Catholic Register has a report today about how a man had lost his agricultural tools and was raising turkeys before ISIS came. And he's a professor, but his money and his income came from the agricultural work. Those are all lost. He needs to replace them. He doesn't need new skills. He has those skills.
He needs equipment.
But he needs equipment. Think of dentists.
Right.
Think of beauty salons.
Sure.
All that equipment has been destroyed or stolen by ISIS.
I sat with a man who owned a hardware store, everything destroyed. Another man who invited me in for breakfast was an electrician. All of his things were destroyed. We have to leave it there. Nina Shea, Director for the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Up next, a march for life in a major European city draws tens of thousands. And the Flying Nuns. A group of religious has some fun in the snow. The Archdiocese of New Orleans is launching a new program to highlight the harmful impact of explicitly sexual material online. Mass on February 17th and 18th will address this issue and mark Safe Haven Sunday. Homilies and prayer petitions will focus on the pornography problem, and tools will be provided to protect families. To learn more about the program, plus other Catholic news of the day, visit National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. Rainy weather did not stop pro-lifers in Paris from marching this Sunday. Organizers estimate 40,000 people were there despite heavy rain. They completed the entire route in the City of Light, most of them donning umbrellas, which was great. A moment of silence was held for the unborn. More than 200,000 abortions are performed each year in France, according to government statistics. A new exhibit at the Vatican Museums recreates a number of masterpieces using people with disabilities. The revisited works focus on the life of Jesus and date back to the Renaissance. Divine Creature is on display until the beginning of March. And finally, our newscast is going downhill. 7 nuns studying at the Catholic University of America are also going downhill very quickly. The group of 5 skiers, a snowboarder, and 1 observer spent the day on the mountains in Fairfield, Pennsylvania. A Facebook post says when the day ended, each nun had a huge smile on her face. You know, we encounter sisters throughout our lives, and these sisters devote lives to prayer, but just like everybody else, they like to have a little fun. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.